So good evening everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us tonight for our first Career Masterclass Webinar, Business as a Force for Good. My name is Sophia Ridwan and my team looks after RMIT alumni engagement in mentoring, work integrated learning, grad recruitment, events and guest speaking opportunities like tonight. This evening I'm very excited to speak with an RMIT alumnus who's making a significant impact in the social entrepreneurship space. Nicolette Ranieri graduated with a Bachelor of Arts, International Studies in 2010. Although that was less than 5 years ago, she's been very busy and I've been speaking to her a lot tonight about some of the really interesting things that she's been up to. During her studies, she co-founded the Thankyou Group and was the Director of Projects until March 2012. In addition to Thankyou, she also worked as a Program Manager and Coach for Community Development with ACC International Relief, and currently she's working in dual roles at YourGrocer Australia and the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre. Nicolette, it's great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Sophia.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So before we move into the webinar, I'll just run through for everyone listening the schedule and some basic housekeeping guidelines. On the screen in front of you, you should see the basic structure of the presentation this evening. It's going to be a really informal conversation between myself and Nicolette. We'll talk about her RMIT experience, her career journey so far, and what social enterprise means to her. We'll aim to talk for around half an hour to 40 minutes, and then open up to you guys for questions. So if you think of anything that you'd like to ask Nicolette during this discussion, please just type it in the chat bar, and then if we have time, we'll answer them as the session is going, or save them at the end when we have some time for questions. So without further ado, let's start, Nicolette, with your time at RMIT. I know with my university degree and with other people that I've spoken to, the degree that they choose is just something that they fell into. Was it similar with you, or was international studies something that you'd wanted to do for a very long time?
Well, I'd always been, for a very long time, I'd been passionate about social justice. So I'm actually originally South African, and my family moved to China when I was young, and then we lived in Singapore. And then we came and settled in Australia. And so from a young age, I really was exposed to the inequalities around the world between the rich and the poor. And I just became passionate about wanting to do something about that. So when I was choosing my courses, I guess I was looking for something that would, I guess, fulfill me in that sense. But actually choosing my RMIT degree, I remember I was at schoolies, and it was the day I could change my preferences, and I'd been chasing down someone who'd studied international development, and I finally got onto them, and they were like, you absolutely have to go to RMIT, they've got the best global studies institute, that's what you need to do. And so I basically just took it on the, I guess, on the recommendation of this one person, but yeah, it turned out really well. Yeah.
Perfect. That sounds like it was meant to be. Did you have any particular highlights of studying at RMIT?
Yeah. So being an ambassador, a youth ambassador to China was a really amazing experience. I was there for 3 months doing that. And then other than that, it was, I guess, it was a long drawn out highlight which really shaped my career, was just starting to understand how complex the idea of helping people is. It was a really rude awakening coming into a lot of my subjects and finding out that we actually can do more damage than good a lot of the time. And so I think when I look back on it, a highlight was really just understanding that. And of course, starting Thankyou while I was at university was an amazing experience too.
So you mentioned that during your studies you helped to co-found the Thankyou Group. For those of you who don't know, Thankyou Group is a great social enterprise that sells water, food and body care products, and then uses the profits from those sales to fund a range of projects in developing nations. Nicolette, can you tell us a little bit about the Thankyou Group and the idea behind it?
Yeah, the idea was actually really simple. At the time, the Australian bottled water industry was worth $600 million. And at the same time, a group of us became aware of the world water crisis and how many people have unsafe water and the terrible impacts of that. So to us it just made sense. Let's start a bottled water company and let's send the profits to projects that build solutions to safe water. So it sounded really simple at the time, and then we just started it, and we were just passionate about, I guess, being able to be part of an answer, and this idea of using our purchasing dollars to actually have an impact somewhere else in the world.
So what were some of the projects, for example, that you funded through Thankyou?
Well, our very first project was in Cambodia, and actually after I spent time in China as a youth ambassador for RMIT, I went there and I spent a couple months. And we were doing projects in rural Cambodia where access to safe water was extremely limited. People were using pond water that was extremely dirty, and you know, animals would drink from the same water as humans, and all that kind of stuff. And what we were doing there is building biosand filters. So we worked with a really well-recognized organization over there who were helping local people build their own water filters out of products that were just sourced locally. And it was really amazing to I guess, see our very first project, the impact that it was having on families and their economic situation as well as their health. Yeah, that's the kind of work that Thankyou does.
How could you possibly translate the experience that you had being at university in Melbourne and living and working in Australia with the very different experiences, like the people that you were helping through the Thankyou Group? How did you translate or bring together those two very different concepts or those different ideas?
Sorry, do you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, so I guess I'm just trying to, I can imagine it would be a really big challenge to go from living and working in Australia to having to find solutions for people living in a totally different environment. Was that one of the biggest challenges that you had early on in starting Thankyou, or were there other challenges as well?
Yeah, sorry, I understand. Well, the great thing is that in the very beginning of Thankyou, we decided that we weren't in the situation where we could be experts in safe water solutions and initiatives. So I think one of the smartest things we ever did was making sure that that Thankyou always worked with well-established, well-reputed organizations that did good development. And so we didn't really have to worry so much about actually developing programs. All I needed to know was how to look for a good program, how to set up a good partnership with NGOs that were doing the work. And so while that was challenging, again, having studied international studies was a really useful, I guess, resource. And then from there, like, I would say the biggest challenge was actually just getting traction. Like any company, whether it's a social enterprise or just any old startup, finding customers, figuring out exactly what our value proposition was, and communicating that, and building legitimacy was a real big challenge in the company, and it did take years to establish, a lot of hard work. And then on a personal level, I'd say the biggest challenge that I had was, I guess, just growing into that role. You know, we were all 19, 20 when we started the company, and I'm an introvert, and I always look about 5 years younger than I actually am. And so when I was walking into these meetings with, you know, big retailers and big franchises across Australia, I'd try to look older than I was, and we'd take our P plates off our cars, and just learning to, I guess, have the confidence in ourselves to push and persist for what we wanted. That was a massive learning curve.
Absolutely. I can imagine that experience would be difficult for anybody, let alone a 19-year-old. Did you have a mentor or a lecturer or anybody that provided advice to you over this period that was really helpful?
We actually had so many people who helped us. Like, Thankyou exists because of, I would say, at least 100 people who just went out of their way to mentor us, but also give us great breaks. You know, supporting us to get things up. You know, just incredibly. So a water bottling company let us do our first run of bottles, which you normally have to pay, you know, $250,000 to get done. They let us do it all up front and back pay them once we sold the bottles. So from companies like that to helping us to lecturers who let me shape my assignments around my work at Thankyou, and therefore I could have the time to think about the challenges the business is facing, you know, all the way to just family and friends who got in there and helped us do, I guess, the hard yards as well.
Absolutely. So if we're looking back at your RMIT degree, I know that you didn't study business specifically, but was there anything in your international degree that helped you in starting up a new social enterprise?
Absolutely. The social part of the social enterprise, that whole
Yeah.
first word. Like I mentioned before, at uni I really learnt about helping others, and when I say that I'm doing quotation marks with my fingers, everyone who can't see me. You know, I think you really need to understand the issues that you're tackling with your business and the social aspect. So you can get so caught up in creating a business that generates profit that then can go, you know, in the case of Thankyou, the way the model works is the profit that the company generates goes to solve, like, solutions to solve the problem. And that kind of business, you really need to understand the problem. If we had been funding water projects out there that weren't actually effective, which the stats in water and sanitation are terrible. I think, you know, at the time, 70% of development projects around safe water weren't effective. And so as a company, we could have a terrific product and a lot of media and a lot of people buying what we had, but if we didn't understand the issues, the complexities around that part of development, then we would have failed. So yeah, definitely.
So that keyword social is actually the basis of our first audience question, which is from Athena, which was submitted along with the registration forms. And just a reminder to everybody listening, feel free to pop any questions that you have in the chat bar, and we'll try and get to them either throughout the session or afterwards. But Athena asks, do you think there's a difference between entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship, and what are some of the different skills that you might need for both or either of these two things?
Yeah, so like you were just saying, for the second part of that phrase, for the entrepreneurship, it is, I think it's the same transferable skills. You need to know how to build a product, create traction, solve a problem, do something that people are willing to pay for, have an excellent product, and that's the same hard skills that you'll face in any startup, whether it's social or not. But yeah, like I was saying before, that the social aspect, yeah, I couldn't stress enough that understanding social complexities and the issues that you're tackling really well, or getting around people who do understand it really well and pulling them into your effort it is so important. It's definitely something that we learned in Thankyou and that I feel like I've continued to learn you know, throughout the rest of my roles elsewhere. I really fell into entrepreneurship. I learnt it all by doing, but understanding the social issues was, I guess, really important for me.
Absolutely. So just jumping forward now to your current role, like I mentioned in the intro, you're working now with the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre, heading up the Social Entrepreneurs Program. For those of you who don't know, the ASRC is the largest provider of aid, legal and health services to people seeking asylum in Australia. These numbers are amazing. So each year it has more than 1,200 volunteers and 60 staff assist around 2,000 asylum seekers with their services. Nicolette, how did you become involved with this organisation?
Well, to answer that properly, I kind of need to reverse backwards a little bit and explain to you what happened to me between Thankyou and ASRC. So I left Thankyou and I joined an aid and development organisation, again, because I felt like I needed to continue to learn about social issues and how you do, how we can I guess, facilitate social change well. And that whole period of time, it was about 3.5 years that I was at the organisation, I just learnt so much about empowerment and became very, very passionate about it as well. I'd always heard the term and I'd used it a lot as well, but I'd realised I'd been using it wrong, that empowerment is actually about facilitating others to take their power back. To be empowered, someone needs to be actively taking their power back and acting on it. And yeah, I just became so passionate about this idea. I think the best way I can explain it is I guess through something that happened to me. So I was in West Timor once on a trip, and there was this village right on the border of East Timor and West Timor, and they were refugees who'd fled and settled from East Timor, and it was an incredibly impoverished community, very isolated from the rest of the Indonesian communities because they were from over the border originally. And we were going over there because we had heard some people want to work with them around housing, around a few other initiatives. And so we went there, and rather than coming and being the great white people who had, were going to solve all their housing problems, we actually sat down with them for 3 days, and we taught them what we knew about development. And we went through exercises where with what we call appreciative inquiry, which is thinking back on your stories of strengths, the assets you have, the skills you have, and what makes you a community. And then moving into like their vision. What did they want to be? What did they want their community to look like? And at the end of this process, they took their vision and they took all of the barriers they felt were in their way to achieving that vision, and created ideas of solutions that they could could do based on their skills and their resources. And we left, and unfortunately we couldn't keep working with them for quite a long time. So 6 months had gone by when we weren't able to do anything with them. But when we did come back 6 months later, feeling terrible that none of this stuff had happened yet, I remember rounding the corner into the village and noticing that all the roads were paved.
Wow.
There was a bridge crossing a river that wasn't there before, and there were all these men on houses fixing roofs and goats all over the place. It was an entirely different village 6 months later. And when we talked to them, we were kind of asking them what happened, and they were like, "Oh, we realized that we didn't need to wait for you to come and help us do this." The women went down into the valley, they brought rocks up and they crushed them, and they used that with cement to build their roads. They applied to the Indonesian government for a bridge, and they actually got it. And they started testing different ideas of food security. So they were doing goats, and they tried corn. And this is a story that just, for me, sums up what empowerment is about. It's about creating a space and a platform where people can realize that they actually have their ability rather than their disability. And sometimes when we think we're helping people, we're actually reinforcing that you need help rather than you have the power to be part of the solution to the challenges you face. Anyway, so I said all that to answer your question, that I finished up at ACC because I really wanted to get my hands dirty in this stuff. I wanted to keep grappling with it and keep learning about it. And this job came up, and it was about entrepreneurship and development and about asylum seekers becoming part of their own solution, and it was just too good to be true. And so, yeah, I took up this program in September last year, and I've been developing it ever since.
Cool. So it's basically like, planting a seed with somebody to be able to take control of their own life situation. Is that, in the example that you gave from West or East Timor, is the work that you're trying to do now with the ASRC similar to that in an Australian context?
Yeah, it is. So it might not be a village, and it might not be, huts that we're talking about, but it's still a group of people that have incredible social challenges around them at the moment. And there's a lot of people around Australia who, a lot of different voices on the subject. And the one voice that you don't hear much of is actually the asylum seekers themselves. And so I believe, and our organisation believes, that asylum seekers are really misportrayed in our media and by our government, and that by assisting them to stand on their own 2 feet, they'll be empowered to advocate for themselves. They'll be living examples that asylum seekers are here to bring value to our community, that they're incredibly grateful for the protection that this country, I guess the potential of protection that this country represents to them, and they only want to give back for that. Yeah.
So in a nutshell, what are the goals of the Social Entrepreneurs Program?
So I guess the ultimate, the goal is that we support asylum seekers who want to start their own businesses. The impact we hope to have is that they then become voices of change. But the way we try to achieve this goal is the three ways. So firstly, we're trying to build a community of people who are all like-minded, all passionate about businesses, where asylum seekers can start to build their social capital, start to build their networks and connections in a place where they don't really know anyone. And as we all know, a business is not about what you know, it's about who you know. And Thankyou really taught me that, you know, if it wasn't for all the people that helped us build Thankyou, it wouldn't exist. So building a community, that's our first strategy. Our second one is pathways. So working with each individual asylum seeker on the things they need to do to be business ready. So it might be English that they need to improve on. It might be a qualification they need recognized. It might be work experience in an industry that they're hoping to get into, all kinds of things. And we work with them on that pathway and also achieving those things. And lastly, we incubate businesses. So once they're ready, we run a 4-month program that they access coaching and intensive support where they actually launch their businesses and find their first customers. So we just started our first official business incubator 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
So we're really excited about the 6 businesses that we have coming through at the moment.
So the asylum seekers who take on the program, or especially the ones that are part of your incubator program, for example, are they often already entrepreneurs, or is becoming an entrepreneur something they decide to do when they join the program or when they move to Australia?
It's definitely a mix of both. So we have some amazing men and women who ran great businesses in their home countries before they had to flee. Then we also have people who are still really talented, impressive professionals who find it really difficult to break into their field here. So they might be scientists or geologists or academics, medical professionals who really are just finding it extremely difficult to find work in their field. And so starting a business seems like something that most of them still lack the idea of owning a business and working for themselves, but it's also, I guess, a solution to the fact that they can't find employment.
Do you have a couple of examples of success stories that have really stuck in your mind?
Yeah, there's so many amazing people that I work with. So there's one woman I work with who ran she was the first woman to own a construction company in Iran, which is very impressive. And she's doing a coffee cart. So last night we actually had an event at our organisation. It was the first time she served coffee to people from behind a cart rather than at the cafe she works at. And it's an amazing experience to watch her in her element of all her hard work over the last year sort of coming together, and coffee is just the beginning for her. You know, she plans to build many great businesses, but realizes it's a slow process sometimes getting back up on your feet. We also have another gentleman who is doing boutique travel tours to the Middle East. He's worked in tourism his entire life. And now he's helping people design kitchen tours to locals' homes and all kinds of amazing travel trips that he's working on. I could just keep going on. People who have just been in Australia sometimes for actually a long time, just not knowing whether or not they'll be approved to stay. Just saying, you know what, I'm just going to make the most of my time here and hope that I do get granted protection, and I just take my hats off to every single one of them, because the stories of where they come from and why they've left, and then the life they've had in Australia since they've come, they're just incredible people to have also the resilience to start a business, which we all know is pretty hard to do.
Absolutely, especially, in the example of the Iranian woman, going from construction to working in the cafe industry must be a huge challenge in itself, in addition to all the other challenges that you spoke about.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed. Something that we spoke about earlier was the fact that a lot of the asylum seekers that you come across are interested in starting social enterprises, so businesses that also contribute to a greater purpose as opposed to strictly commercial businesses. Are you able to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So one of the moments that has impressed on me the most since the 12 months I've been working with asylum seekers was when I sat down with a group of about 8 of them, and we were talking about why we were all involved in this program and why I was running it, but also why they were starting businesses. And the conversation got so lively and so passionate because every single one of them were talking about how they want to provide other jobs to asylum seekers who just can't find work, or just other people in the community who can't find work. They talked about wanting to, I guess, change the debate around asylum seekers and prove that they are here to contribute. And I think that that was just a moment where I realized that they're actually here for the same reason that I am. They want to create an Australia that looks a bit more like their dream.
Yeah.
One of the gentlemen I spoke to, he actually used to teach women in Afghanistan who couldn't leave the house during the Taliban rule how to weave carpets. And he would then sell them at market. And he'd been reading our budget report, which is just, in my opinion, extremely impressive in itself, because I have not read that report. And he noticed that to get childcare, women were going to need to work a minimum amount of hours, and he was saying that the women in my community, the Afghan community, many of them are illiterate, they can't find jobs.
Yeah.
What if we brought this weaving idea, Australian weaved Afghan carpets, and that will be helping solve a problem that our women face, as well as meeting a demand that's out there in the community. And so I guess that's just one example of a business idea where he might not be labeling it as a social enterprise, and none of them probably would tell you their business is a social enterprise, but they all have such wide social impacts on the community here.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say are some of the biggest challenges for asylum seekers in starting their own businesses? Doesn't seem like it's generating good ideas. Is it cultural differences, or is it understanding the different Australian landscape, or what are some of the biggest challenges?
There are a whole lot, and we spent a fair bit of time figuring this out, but what I would say the biggest are the networks, so not knowing people and not getting connected into opportunities. The others are the Australian context. So a lot of people I work with say that they feel like they're blind in Australia, that ever since they came here they just feel like they can't see. And that's just understanding the way we work. The bureaucracy of starting a business, the administration is very different to back home for them. And the third would be capital, so not having much capital to begin businesses. So they're all looking at really low entry businesses that don't take much finance to get up and running.
So you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I've got an audience question here from Bridget, who asks, for refugees from a non-English speaking background, do you also coordinate English language learning services in tandem with their business ideas?
Yeah, yes, we do. So before I mentioned that we have 3 strategies. So the first is the community, the second is the pathways. So in that pathways, we identify what are needs, and sometimes that is English language, and quite often it is. But the beauty of how we work is we don't work in isolation. So we actually work in something called the Innovation Hub at the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre, and it's a space that's been created for asylum seekers to look at their future and I guess actively work towards their goals. So we have an English program, an employment program that can provide work experience into the industry they want to build their business. We have education program that can help them get their qualifications recognised here. And so all these programs work together really well to make sure that asylum seekers are working on all the different aspects, I guess, all the different barriers that they have towards business are being dealt with within that hub, and also with other community groups that we work with as well.
One of the barriers is probably, or potentially, building confidence and empowering individuals. Is there something that your organisation does to empower individuals?
Yeah, definitely. You're completely right. When someone spends 6 years in Australia with no work rights, not allowed to do anything but, sort of sit in their houses by law, like, it's an incredibly disempowering process. Even just the application process, they never know what's going on. The decisions are never really quite explained. It's just a very murky system, and that in itself becomes very disempowering for anyone. And so the Innovation Hub is actually all about empowerment. It's actually built on this theory that sounds a bit fancy. It's called symbiotic innovation, and it's this idea that we all live in symbiosis with one another. So I rely on you and you rely on me, and in order for me to run a great entrepreneurship program, I need you, and in order for you to start a business, you need me. And so it's all about working hand in hand with asylum seekers. So all of our programs, we have asylum seekers working in them as well as benefiting from them, so that the solutions that we're creating are not actually, I guess, we're not just helping people, they're developing their own solutions at the same time. And like I was talking about before, that's what empowerment is giving someone a space where they can actually take control of the issues and actually build that solution together. So symbiotic innovation is a really exciting theory that our director has developed and worked with Oxford University on, and so we're testing it there, and it's definitely, like, I guess the best thing I can say about it is that 5 out of the 6 businesses that have actually made it into the incubator, which means we're confident that they're really ready to build good businesses, have been through other parts of the Innovation Hub. One was part of a youth leadership team, one was volunteering at our reception desk, 2 were part of our soccer program. And so it's only through the empowerment process that people actually get ready to take that big risk of having a business. So it's a beautiful relationship that we all have with each other, all the different programs. Yeah.
It must be a really fun place to go into work, and all the different connections and the fantastic stories and individuals that you meet must be very rewarding.
Yeah, it really is. One of my favourite quotes is by an Aboriginal woman, and it says, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up in mine, then let's work together." And I think for people who just don't know what to do about the asylum seeker issues in Australia, understanding that actually, like, the solution is bound up in each other, I think it's a really beautiful picture.
So to come full circle now, I know we've talked about RMIT and a couple of different parts of your career journey. My personal belief is that rather than having one career, people end up having a number of different themes or threads that just link together the different jobs or career experiences. For you, what do you think are the key themes that link together your different career roles?
I really love that idea because it helps me put a definition around my career. Like, I think I'll use that again. Yeah, I would say there are 3 key themes to my career. So I would say social justice and change. Just passionate about working towards that concept. I love being involved in creating initiatives and solutions. I love that startup phase of something and figuring out what's the best way to solve a problem. So whether that's through a social enterprise or whether that's through building a program at the ASRC, I love being part of that process of setting stuff up. And the third would be empowerment, which I've talked about a fair bit, but acknowledging that, I can't save people, and it's not my place to do that, but I can create spaces where people can become a voice for themselves.
Absolutely. So in terms of, I know that we've got a lot of listeners here tonight and many of them have indicated that, you know, they're interested in a future career in this particular space. What advice would you give them in terms of finding an organisation that links in with their values?
I would say you just need to go out and find out about the places that you're thinking about getting involved in. I completely agree. Like I think it's such a good thing to think about that. It's in many ways your best resource. You are your best resource, and so if you're brilliant at what you do, and then you take those skills to places that align with your values, you're making a statement in itself. So how you go about it, I mean, ask people, talk to people who might be involved with that company or that organisation. Get out there and attend events and network, and I guess Google a lot. But yeah, I think it's a really important thing to do. Yeah, and I think we underestimate it. And if you can't change the place you're working in, like I'm a huge advocate of internal change as well. Like I guess fighting for the workplace that you want if you're already in a place that doesn't quite align with your values.
Yeah, I really like that. You know, it's kind of like voting with your feet. Just sort of, you know, make a statement by, you know, choosing an organisation that you feel passionate about, or if it's not an organisation, make the changes within your organisation so that it you know, you feel some sort of satisfaction within your workplace as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing how much better you are at your job when you're passionate about what you're doing.
Absolutely. So it's probably about time now to open up the floor to questions from our audience. We'll try and get through as many as possible in the remaining time. So if you're listening and you have a question for Nicolette, please send it through now and we'll try and answer them. The first one I wanted to ask is about your role at YourGrocer, which we haven't really talked about. But are you able to tell us a little bit about your experiences there and how it fits in with your other roles?
Yeah, so YourGrocer is a local Melbourne startup that I became involved in. Well, I've been involved from the beginning, but I've started working there last year. And YourGrocer is about being able to shop at your local butcher, baker, greengrocer, and deli. So all your independent shops. In a way that's convenient to you, so home delivery. We started the business because we were shopping at Coles and Woolies really late at night because we'd work late and then have no food in the cupboards, and just really wished we weren't at that big duopoly, but it still ended up there every day or every week. So yeah, that's how we started, and I guess YourGrocer is a good example of what I would call a social business. So it's still trying to build values of, I guess, the ethics around, you know, I personally don't feel like the ethics around Coles and Woolies and the way they behave, I don't think they don't behave ethically. So we're out to change that and balance the scales so that independents, manufacturers and farmers have more power. So, but it's definitely a for-profit business, so it's a good example of a social business.
Sorry, just having a look at the next question. What do you think, what's your advice for someone who's interested in getting a job in the social entrepreneurship space, and what are, I guess, the first steps to moving out of a typical 9-to-5 job to becoming an entrepreneur?
I think just take that step and just make it happen. Don't sit on it too long. Don't think about it too much. Figure out what you're passionate about, then put yourself in situations where you can learn. So, you know, volunteer or just bug another startup or social enterprise until they accept you for free. Do what you can to just get amongst the people and the companies that you'd like to work with. Yeah, I guess do what we tell our businesses at the ASRC, which is just figure out a way to start, even if it's for cheap and it's not the ideal product or service that you aim for. Just go out there, do it, and prove that you can find customers and then make it a better business as you grow.
I've got another question here from Christina, who asks, What you gave some examples earlier on about how difficult it was to, I guess, as an individual or as particularly as a young person to find the confidence to go into a boardroom and to go to a meeting. Was there what were some of the tips that you would give to somebody else in a similar position? Was there a self-improvement plan that you put upon yourself, or did you just go in there and just say, I'm going to have the confidence to do this?
Yeah, I don't feel like I have any great tips or words of wisdom about that. I just think if you just put yourself in the position where you have to suck it up and do it, then you just kind of rise to the challenge. Or you might fail the first time, but then you learn a lot from the experience. So, yeah, I guess surround yourself with people that encourage you as well, and people who believe in you and push you to be better, so that when you start, I don't know, if you're anything like me, you sometimes start that negative self-talk. There can be other people who can kind of whip you into shape, but I think the biggest thing is just put yourself in situations where you're always learning and when you're always in the deep end, and then it just happens, you rise to the challenge.
Absolutely, and it's probably a good lesson to actually fail sometimes and to know that it's not the end of the world. You can just bounce back up again.
Yeah, I would say that's a perfect way of putting it.
I've got another question here. It might be a tricky one, but it builds on, I guess, the theme of the whole webinar tonight. In terms of business as a force for good, what's your definition of good?
I think there is no single definition of good. It's definitely subjective. So yeah, I think when we're talking about all this stuff, obviously we will all have different ideas of what is good, and also just we'll all have, I guess, different passions, and I think that's what the beauty of it, that if we're all chasing things that we're passionate about, the world slowly becomes a place that we're all happy with. Yeah, there is
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
I have another question here from Stephanie, who says, what are your opinions on crowdfunding?
I think crowdfunding's great. I've never actually done it myself, so I've never been part of a crowdfunding campaign, but I know a lot of people who have done some really cool things. Crowdfunding, I hear that it's all about the video, so if you're thinking of starting a crowdfunding campaign, I think the trick is apparently that it's all about how good your film is. But yeah, I think it's a brilliant thing, and I think it's used quite a lot, so you would probably just need to learn how to differentiate yourself or build your network before you crowdfund, so that you have an existing really large pool of people that you can draw upon to then spread word of mouth. So that's the great thing about Thankyou, is before we had our really successful 7-Eleven social media campaign, and then our Coles and Woolies social media campaign, we actually had a really strong group of people who were already very vocal about Thankyou. And I think, although I haven't done it, I would say crowdfunding probably becomes more effective the bigger your initial base is.
Yeah, I think the networking one is a really important one. I have a question here from Michael Johnson, who says, what are some of the most common mistakes a social entrepreneur tends to make?
Oh, that's a good one.
Putting you on the spot now, Nicolette.
I can tell you what my mistakes were. I don't know about the most common mistakes. I would say one thing to really look out for is if you're building a business so if it's like a traditional social enterprise, although traditional is probably not the right word, they haven't been around all that long. But if you're doing that, then I would just say make sure your business model is strong. You don't want to have to rely on grants and donations and things like that in order for your social enterprise to continue. Like, I really think that the strength of a social enterprise is if it has a product that people are already willing to pay for, and that in itself it's a business that sustains itself. So I would say make sure that you're getting amongst other entrepreneurs. Like sometimes, like I actually love going to the tech community entrepreneurship meetings, because those guys are so good at building a product that people love because they can't lean on like a social cause for why people are buying their product. They just need to have like a freaking awesome product. And so their hunger and their hustle and their ability to continue to pivot their business until they find something that people will pay for, I think is really something that the social entrepreneurship space needs. So yeah, I think just make sure your business model is really strong and that it you know, having a good social message helps, but having a product that's strong in itself, I think, is kind of the ideal.
Absolutely. I have a question here from Cornelia, who is asking about if you have a guideline that you work towards when you're trying to empower people, or a tool, method, or a formula. I think you've spoken a little bit about this in your previous answer, but are you able to provide a little bit more information?
Yeah, it's such a complex thing. I think it's just about working with people and treating them as people, just like building relationships and building friendships with the people that you want to work with, and creating a space that is the opposite of, I guess, a helper and the helped, and so really breaking down those barriers. So I guess there are different processes that different people have. So my East Timor example, that's actually like a 3-day training course that we developed that takes people through a progressive process where they realize that they are able to take control. But then there's other things like this innovation hub that I'm working in, which the whole space, the way it operates and the way it works, it just reinforces that, hey, we're here to work together, we're partners, like I am because you are, our liberation is tied up together, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's kind of different everywhere you go.
I have another one here which has been asked by a couple of people actually, and I'm not sure how much information or how much commentary you're able to provide, but from your impressions, do you think that there are large organisations that are becoming more socially conscious, so for example, working in a sustainable way or partnering with not-for-profit organisations? Is this something that you've come across more and more?
Yeah, there definitely are. I think for a long time now, companies have realised how important it is to have a strong social justice part of what they do. It's hard to sometimes. It's not more than a CSR strategy, and it's quite superficial. But then you do get companies that it's really like strongly embedded and becoming embedded in their culture. So you do. I think a good way to tell is, most of those companies will have like a team of people who work together in that part of so it might be like a CSR team or like a social innovation team within the company. And I guess a good way of sussing that out would be like how much power does that team have and how much ability and influence do they have in the company. But I would definitely say it's changing, and I think the more that we all, what was the term you used before, like use our feet. I forgot
vote with your feet.
Yeah, vote with our feet. The more we vote with our feet, the more companies will realise they're just going to have to get their act together.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one here which you'll probably like, but someone asks, is there a way that I can become involved at the ASRC either as a volunteer or to help support their businesses? What would you recommend as the best ways to be involved with the organisation?
Yeah, definitely. So you can come along to one of our info sessions. We have jobs like volunteer jobs and pro bono work going there all the time. So I have a bunch of positions that you could talk to me about and see if you're interested in them and have the right experience and skills. So probably the best way to do that is just contact the RMIT Alumni Team and get in touch with me, and I can kind of point you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to contact us. We'll send through some information after the session.
Yeah, and anyone you know, send everyone my way.
I have a question as well for you, and it's a little bit biased because we run a mentoring program here at RMIT, but I'm interested, do you run any mentoring programs for your asylum seekers at ASRC?
Yeah, we do. We have a really strong mentorship program that's having really wonderful impacts on people. So we have a few different aspects of mentoring. So we have social mentoring, so that's personal support and building, I guess, community here. And then we have professional mentoring, so helping people, connecting people with individuals who own their profession in Australia so that they can start to get insight into the industry here and start to build their connections. And then we do business mentorship as well in my program, where you either work with someone for a long period of time and you do all that support, all that emotional support as well as the strategic support, and then, you know, or help people in your specific skill set. So mentorship is absolutely a really important part of what the ASRC do.
Fantastic. Well, I think, unfortunately, that's probably all we have time for tonight. Thank you, everybody in the audience, for your questions and for joining us. This is our very first webinar, so we would absolutely love to hear your feedback on what worked, what didn't, and what can be improved. We'll be sending out a survey in the next couple of days, so please fill it out. We'd love to hear from you. We'll also send through some of the links of the information we talked about tonight, as well as other ways that you can continue to be involved with the RMIT alumni community. A very special thanks to Nicolette for joining us. It's been really, really interesting to hear about your career journey and to hear about the ASRC and Thankyou Group. And we hope to see you and everybody listening at another RMIT event soon.